Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, we got some pretty amazing young folks with us today from the Circuit Breakers 4-H Club right here in Laramie County. Some of them are up above, and we got a small group over here that's going to come in and give us a demonstration of their robotics. Mason, come on in. The driver of this little buggy is Mason York, and then Tavia Zimmerman is going to come up here and tell us a little bit about the competition they're going to this summer with their robotics. They're going to Lexington, Kentucky in June. Isn't that cool? They're going to go to Lexington in June for an international competition.
All right.
Tavia, why don't you tell us what's going on?
All right.
Hi everyone, I'm Tavia Zimmerman with the Circuit Breakers 4-H Robotics. My team 26276 competed at state in February. We ended up placing second, and now we have got the opportunity to go to an international event in Kentucky.
Tavia, when is that event? When is your event?
Our event is going to be on the 26th through the 28th of June.
Okay, and how many of you are going to go?
Just me and then Mason, Bryce, and Lizzie.
Okay, very good. Well done, kids.
Congratulations and good luck.
The reason we are here today is to talk about our entire team's goals as a whole. Our goal is to spread STEM throughout Wyoming through 4-H. We're hoping that if we are able to start robotics groups throughout Wyoming, that youth will be able to experience STEM and technology earlier on. This gives them a chance to have a tech future and to get different job opportunities. It'll also help Wyoming's economy. It'll advance the industries that we've already got going. It'll keep Wyoming expanding and allow us to grow as a state.
Thank you. Okay. Senator Olson,
Mr. President, privilege of the floor.
floor is yours.
It is my honor to introduce to you over here in the west side of the Capitol, the 492nd Emergency Service Casper Composite Squadron from the Wyoming Civil Air Patrol. We have with us Cadet Second Lieutenant Luke Kaiser. If you could all please stand. Cadet Chief Master Sergeant Mrunal Patil, Cadet Master Sergeant Zoe Maggie, and Cadet Technical Sergeant Jeremiah Manning. And if I may, they have a special system where as a legislator, you can actually join as an honorary major. I joined myself as an honorary major, so I'd encourage everyone to look into that. It's a fantastic program. And welcome to the Senate.
Welcome, Civil Air Patrol. Any other privileges? Okay. Let's get to work here. Signing of enrolled acts. Here we go. Senate Enrolled Act number 94 being original Senate File 44.
Senate Enrolled Act number 94, being original Senate File 44, Fairness in Sports, Intercollegiate Athletics, an act relating to education.
I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 94, being original Senate File 44. I've so signed. House Enrolled Act number 73.
House Enrolled Act number 73, being original House Bill 32, an act relating to common law, statutes, and rules of construction.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 73, being original House Bill 32. I've so signed. House Enrolled Act number 74.
House Enrolled Act number 74, being original House Bill 164, an act relating to professions and occupations.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 74, being original House Bill 164. I'm so signed. House Enrolled Act number 75.
House Enrolled Act number 75, being original House Bill 259, an act relating to school building and facility projects.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 75, being original House Bill 259. I'm so signed. House Enrolled Act number 76.
House Enrolled Act number 76, being original House Bill 133, an act relating to administration of the government.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 76, being original House Bill 133. I'm so signed. And House Enrolled Act number 77.
House Enrolled Act number 77, being original House Bill 137, an act relating to the revision of statutes and other legislative enactments.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 77, being original House Bill 137. I'm so signed. Joint Conference Committee reports. House Message number 453, referencing Senate Joint Conference Committee 1, the Senate File 17.
Joint Conference Committee Report number 1, referencing House Message number 453 regarding Senate File 17, Carbon Dioxide Enhanced Oil Recovery Stimulus. Signed, Representative Heiner, Knapp, and Williams, Senators Rothfuss, Anderson, and Nethercott.
Thank you. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move Joint Conference Committee report on Senate File 17, Carbon Dioxide Enhanced Oil Recovery Stimulus, referencing House Message number 53, and ask the body to vote aye. Mr. President, the concern that we had when it left the Senate was the House Third Reading Amendment number 1, which was the appropriation of $10 million for a project. We agreed with the House to eliminate that amendment. So we got basically the interests of the Senate represented. We did adopt House Standing Committee Amendment number 1, which was just a tweak in some of the funding mechanism language that was in it, which is a perfectly innocuous amendment. So no problem with that. So, Mr. President, I urge the body to vote aye. Happy to answer any questions, but basically we got our interests entirely.
Okay, discussion on concurrence, or on the committee report, I'm sorry. Question being called. The motion is that the Senate do adopt the Joint Conference Committee number 1 report referencing Senate File 17, and to vote aye, the chief clerk will call the roll.
Joint Conference Committee report number 1 to Senate File 17. Anderson? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Trego? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? No. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Aye. No. Jones? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? No. President Biteman?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 17, Joint Conference Committee Number 1, 27 aye, 4 no.
By your vote, you have adopted the Joint Conference Committee Number 1 report referencing Senate File 17. Joint Conference Committee Report, message number 416.
Message number 416, Joint Conference Committee Report regarding House Bill 154, referencing Senate Message number 416. House Representatives signed Closton, Locke, and Yin. Senators Pearson, Hicks, and Steinmetz.
Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of Joint Conference Committee Report Number 1 to HB 154 and ask for an aye vote. The Joint Conference Committee agreed to keep second reading Amendment 2 and third reading Amendment 2. The reasoning behind this is they felt the amendments kept strengthened the bill, one deleting the word then and adding after consultation with the county clerk. On the other amendments, the wording or offering to vote is used throughout statute, as you can see from the handout referencing 22-26-106. That was passed out yesterday. The committee believes that if the body wishes to change this wording throughout statute, this should be brought in a separate bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Discussion on the report. Myself. Senator Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. President. So just a little bit, having a little bit of a hard time reading in all of exactly what happened in the conference committee. So question for another member of the committee or the bringer of the motion. Are we going back to the language where our good Secretary of State or that office gets to direct the sheriff to do a particular thing or not? And is that language still in, that language out? Could someone tell me about that? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Craigo. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. The language of the Secretary of State in consultation with the county clerk is in. That was what the determination of the entire committee was, that were present there. They wanted to keep that language. So it's the Secretary of State in consultation with the county clerk. So it's basically, we kept the Hicks and Pearson amendments, and we receded on the rest of the amendments to the bill.
Any further discussion? Any further questions? You ready to vote? Since you're ready to vote, the motion is that the Senate do adopt the Joint Conference Committee Number 1 report referencing House Bill 154 and vote aye. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Joint Conference Committee Number 1 to House Bill 154. Anderson? Aye. Barlow? No. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Craigo? No. Crum? No. Dockstetter? No. Driscoll? No. French? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? No. Cole? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? No. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? No. Olson? No. Pappas? No. Pearson? Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. On the report, 14 aye, 17 no.
By your vote, you have failed to adopt the Joint Conference Committee Number 1 report referencing House Bill 154. Joint Conference Committee report referencing Senate Message Number 419.
Joint Conference Committee Reports Number 1, referencing Senate Message 419, House Bill 246. Signed, Representatives Locke, Stivar, and Weber. Senators Smith, Boner, and Ide.
Senator Smith.
El Jefe, wrong script, Ellen. Mr. President, I move adoption of the Joint Conference Committee Report Number 1 to House Bill 246 and ask that you vote aye. Everybody, this is one of your favorite little bills, and the idea initially came across over here from the House that we would do every Wednesday as Wyoming Wednesday. So we amended it, we sent it back over there, hey, let's just do one Wyoming Wednesday and have the governor select that date. And then they amended it back to us with the idea that we'd choose, how about the compromise be this, that we'd have one Wednesday a month. The second Wednesday of every month be Wyoming Wednesday. And your representatives thought, you know what, what we want to do, this is for the kids, this is for our traditions, for our culture. It's to celebrate Wyoming. We are the least taxed, least regulated. We should be the most prosperous state in the union, and our kids should be proud of that. And so with that, I would urge everybody to vote for this. It'd be the second Wednesday of every month, would be Wyoming Wednesday. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Senator. Discussion on the Conference Committee report. Seeing none, question being called. The motion is that the Senate do adopt the Joint Conference Committee Number 1 report referencing House Bill 246 and vote aye. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Joint Conference Committee Number 1 to House Bill 246. Anderson? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Grew? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Cole? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? No. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? No. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Joint Conference Committee Number 1, House Bill 246, 25 aye, 6 no.
By your vote, you have adopted the Joint Conference Committee Number 1 report referencing House Bill 246. Is that it for joint conference committees? All right. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives. Message number 12, override governor's veto failed. Mr. President, the House failed to override the governor's veto on House Enrolled Act number 55, being original House Bill number 79. Ayes 35, noes 27. House Enrolled Act number 55, being original House Bill number 79, has been transmitted to the Secretary of State for permanent storage. Mr. President, the following messages are dated March 5, and messages report concurrences. Message number 499, concurrence passed. The House did concur on Senate amendments to House Bill 164, medical prescriptions off-label purposes. Ayes 54, noes 7, excused 1. Message number 500, House did concur on Senate amendments to House Bill number 32, What is a Woman Act? Ayes 52, noes 10. Message number 501, the House did concur on Senate amendments to House Bill 133, Sanctuary Cities, Counties, and State Prohibition. Ayes 56, noes 6. Message number 502, concurrence passed. Mr. President, the House did concur on Senate amendments to House Bill 137, Revisers Bill. Ayes 62. Message number 503, the House did concur on Senate amendments to House Bill number 259, Supplemental K-12 School Facilities Appropriations 2. Ayes 62, noes 0. Message number 504, conferees appointed for a joint conference committee number 1 from the Senate on amendments to Senate File 34. House conferees are Representative Baer, Chairman, Representative Ott, and Representative Smith. Message number 505, Mr. President, the House appointed House conferees to meet with the like committee number 1 from the Senate on amendments to Senate File 153. House conferees are Representative Locke, Chairman, Representative Heiner, and Representative Kelly. Message number 506, Mr. President, the House appointed House conferees to meet with the like committee number 1 from the Senate on amendments to Senate File 169. House conferees are Representative Washut, Chairman, Representative Angelos, and Representative Baer. Sincerely, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Randy. Okay. What we got left, Ellen? Some veto overrides? Okay. Let's take up some veto overrides. Yeah. All right, Madam Majority Floor Leader, that order of business, the veto overrides.
Mr. President, pursuant to Article 4, Section 8 of the Wyoming Constitution, I move that the Senate reconsider House Enrolled Act 35, being original House Bill 64, chemical abortions, ultrasound requirements, and override the veto of House Bill 64.
You've heard the motion. The motion requires a 2/3 vote to override the veto. Is there any discussion? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm against the veto override. You know, reading the veto override message and letter, I think a lot of the points that were made are appropriate. Those points really get to a lot of the discussion that we had on the Senate floor regarding what this act really ends up accomplishing, whether it protects women's health, whether it achieves any of its interests, or whether it ends up effectively being a piece of legislation that's really punitive to women that are seeking healthcare protection. So I appreciated the governor's viewpoint in that letter. I hope the Senate will consider it strongly and will vote to sustain the governor's veto by voting no at this point. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is, what we're talking about here, folks, is an override of the governor's veto. This is probably one of the most serious things we do in this body. It takes a lot to rise to the level, in my opinion, it takes a lot to rise to the level of consideration to vote for an override. And normally I don't do that. In fact, I don't know that I've ever done that. But in this case, I think the integrity of the Senate is in question. I know who we are. I know the integrity of our leadership, and I think that position brings this particular override to a level that it really needs to be to. I'm going to be an aye vote on this, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cooper. Anybody else wish to speak? Senator Crum?
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, with life beginning at conception, I'm going to be for the override. But I got to tell you, this bill's flawed. This bill's flawed in the transvaginal ultrasound. I brought an amendment to delete that from the bill. And this bill, I would hope we look at this whole process next year as we go into law and try to make this a better process for determining what is life and is it viable, and not to be overburdened on women, because that's not what this is about. This is about protecting life and not overburdening women. I'm going to be for the override, but this bill needs some work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Crum. Further discussion? Senator Case.
Mr. President, the underlying bill has no medical necessity. It's punitive, Mr. President. It's trying to discourage someone from seeking and having an abortion. Mr. President, it requires an incredibly invasive procedure for no reason. It requires the person seeking an abortion to pay for that procedure and to wait 48 hours. Mr. President, people have the right to seek and choose healthcare access. And you've heard it many times, but it's Article 38, the right of healthcare access. Each competent adult shall have the right to make his or her own healthcare decisions. It's right there. It's being challenged in court by the various other things that are passing through here. But we don't even wait for the court decision to come out. We keep piling on restrictions. That's not right, Mr. President. There are only two people in the legislature now that were sponsors of the original health care amendment. I'm proud to be one of them. I'm proud that after all these years, this is being done to protect people's right to health care access. And it's the basis for the court case. Mr. President, how terrible is this that if the Supreme Court were to issue a decision in one particular manner, then the only people that would be required to receive a transvaginal ultrasound might be victims of rape and incest. How does that make sense? To traumatize these women who are at a terrible point in their lives and are victims, to victimize them again. We're not God. We all stand here and do our best, Mr. President. This is not it. Section 7, Article 1, no absolute arbitrary power. Absolute arbitrary power over the lives, liberty, and property of free men exists nowhere in the public, not even the largest majority. Only God has that power, and we don't. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm supporting the governor.
Thank you, Senator. Oh. Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I voted for this bill the first time around. I struggled with it. I struggled with it. And I struggled with it for the reasons that, at least a couple of the reasons that the governor mentioned. Survivors of childhood sexual abuse and victims whose pregnancy is caused by rape or incest. That's my biggest struggle. And having taught for a lot of years, and I actually had a couple students in this situation, the decisions that were made weren't made by them, they were made by their parents. But if they would have had to have gone through what we're asking them to do right now and be re-traumatized, re-victimized, I would feel really bad about that. So I'll probably struggle with this right up until it's time to take the vote. but I certainly understand both sides of it. I've always voted pro-life, I always will. I just think where we're talking about victims of sexual abuse and those that have been raped or had the incest issues, and especially children, I struggle. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Smith, you were next.
Mr. President, I appreciate the good words from the senator from the southwest corner of the state. And we are concerned about women, and that would potentially have an abortion and or that are in that situation, and we want to protect them. And I'm quite sure I heard in here by the bringer of the bill or somebody that that doesn't have to be intrusion, doesn't have that transvaginal ultrasound, doesn't have to, there are other ways to do it without that that component of it. But I read the governor's override letter, and it's very flawed, and I encourage you to vote for this, for an override, because he's very concerned about the psychological effects of this procedure. But what about the psychological effects of having an abortion for the rest of your life? And that's just a reality, and we all know it. And it's becoming more and more real because it's been around for 50 years. All of you, whether you know it or not, you know people that have had it, and it has affected them traumatically. So what we need to do is be on for this, we give women an opportunity to make sure that they're making the right decision for themselves.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Senator Craigo?
Thank you, Mr. President. Approach this from a little bit different perspective, maybe from the legal one. And I have struggled with this bill, as the good senator back in the corner there. I too have struggled all along from a legal perspective. A few years ago, we passed the bill. That started in the other end. I was in that chamber at the time. It was a good law. It was a good bill. 2 years later, we brought another one, and we passed that one. And at that time, I stood up and I said, careful what you do, careful where we go. Because it's my belief that this law will get upheld, because by that time, the first law had already been challenged in court. Remember, this has been going on for quite some time, Mr. President. This is nothing new. And by the time the second bill came along, I said, I am afraid that if we pass this law, we are going to extend the time that abortions can happen in Wyoming. Well, that's where we are. That's exactly what happened. We passed that law, and it essentially started the clock over. It started the clock over on what we're doing. And that's why I'm struggling with this, Mr. President, because I'm afraid that's what we're going to do. Do I believe in this bill? Yep. Am I a pro-life legislator? Yes. And so do I want to uphold those standards? I do. But at some point, we have to decide as a legislature, this group and the group down the hall, at what point do we want to let the court decide? Do we want to let them decide where we are and then make our decision on how we move forward? That's my struggle today, Mr. President. I'll probably be an aye. I'm struggling just like the senator in the back. But that's a decision, and I think it should weigh heavy on all of us. That's a heavy decision. We need to understand the truth of what we're doing from a legal perspective. Where are we going? Where is this taking us? And are we just delaying an answer that we need to get to? Because if all we're doing is making it so the court case lasts another 2 years, we are not doing our job, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. So fellow senators, I greatly respect each one of you and the decision we have to make this afternoon. I'm going to not vote for the override today. I voted in 2022 for an abortion bill. I voted in 23 for the vice president's bill. I am not going to vote for this one. This one is far too intrusive. It's authoritarian. It's a big government over the top of everyone. I just can't support that. It goes too far. We shouldn't be in this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Landon. Anybody else? Senator Rothfuss. For your second time.
Mr. President.
Oh, I didn't see her. Senator Pearson, for your first
Thank you,
time.
Mr. President. I'm on and for this override. For me, this bill is about protecting not only the mother, but the child. I mean, many can say that this is intrusive, but the facts are that these abortion drugs are not safe after a certain gestational period of the baby. And that's the reason for the vaginal ultrasound, is so that those doctors can figure out exactly how far along that baby is. So this is not only protecting the child, but it's protecting the mother as well. On and for this override. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Rothfuss, do you wish to go for your second time?
Thank you, Mr. President, for my second time. Mr. President, I appreciate this debate and discussion, but there was something that was interesting about this last discussion, was a shift where most of the debate centered around the idea of being pro-life and against abortion. This bill is supposed to be about women's health, and none of the debate just now really focused on women's health. A little bit of it mentioned it. But I think this gets back to what we talked about way back on Committee of the Whole, which is that the purpose of this legislation really seems to have nothing to do with women's health. I think we can conclude that because it's against the standard of care that medical providers will provide to a woman that comes into their office given these circumstances. Mr. President, if we were looking out for women, we would want to empower women to be able to work with their own healthcare provider or make their own decisions along with that healthcare provider pursuant to Article 1, Section 38 of the Wyoming Constitution, which indicates that we should not be engaging any limitations. That's the type of bill that is looking out for women's rights. This is trying to make things difficult. This is trying to make it a burden to undertake a chemical abortion when that's in the interest of the woman. And that purpose of that is really to try and implement policies that have otherwise been so far banned by the Supreme Court of the state of Wyoming and by other courts of the state of Wyoming. So what we know is that right now, abortion is legal in Wyoming, and this is trying to find an end run to recognize, all right, well, if it's legal, then let's make it difficult. Let's make it painful. Let's make it traumatic. Let's make it harrowing. Then we can accomplish the same objectives without actually having to illegalize it. And that's unfortunate, but that's what I think this recent debate just captured, because really, I don't see anyone looking out for women's health. I see a desire to try and limit abortion. So, Mr. President, the scenario I want everyone to contemplate is the scenario that is hinted at in the governor's letter and why I certainly support sustaining the veto. And that is a case where you have a victim of rape incest that might live in a rural community in Wyoming, and under current statute would be allowed to undertake a chemical abortion almost immediately once they found out, that individual found out that she was pregnant, to perhaps diminish the psychological and trauma effects of that unfortunate circumstance. That's under the current system. It's already traumatic, but at least there are remedies where the individual and their supportive family and their healthcare provider can come up with a solution that doesn't involve the state of Wyoming, the legislature, or the government in any way. That's good policy. What this says is no. You're a victim of rape incest, you find out you're pregnant. Step one, You need to go and have a transvaginal ultrasound forced upon you, whether you like it or not. It's not the standard of care. No healthcare provider is requiring that, and there are no alternatives. So you've just had a traumatic experience. You might be a young 15-year-old, and now a doctor is going to be required to provide a transvaginal ultrasound, adding to the trauma. But you're not done yet, Mr. President. Now go home. Travel back to wherever you came from, perhaps a few hours. We'll send you a bill. You're welcome. Come back in 2 days, not less, and then we'll give you the procedure that we'll once again charge you for. How is that caring for that individual? How is that compassionate? That is huge government. There's nothing small government about that. That is authoritarian, as one of the senators mentioned. And we're bigger than that. Vote no.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Anybody else wish to speak? Question being called.
Once again, remind people how the vote works, because I did hear someone had that confused earlier in the debate.
Yes, sir. So to be clear, the motion was that the Senate reconsider House Bill, 64, and override the veto of House Bill 64. So a vote of aye would override the veto, a vote of no would sustain the veto.
Thank you, sir.
Okay? This requires a 2/3 vote. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Veto override, House Bill 64, roll call vote. Anderson? No. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? No. French? Aye. Garoop? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Pappas, aye to no. Closing. Vote closed. Veto override, House Bill 64, 22 aye, 9 no.
By your vote, the motion to override the veto of House Bill 64 has passed. Madam Majority Floor Leader. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. President, pursuant to Article 4, Section 8 of the Wyoming Constitution, I move that the Senate reconsider House Enrolled Act 45, being original House Bill 36, and override the veto of House Bill 36 Hathaway Scholarship Amendments.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, you have heard the motion. The motion requires a 2/3 vote to override the veto. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Governor Veto override House Bill 36, HEA 45. Anderson? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Crago? Aye. Crum? No. Dockstader? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? No. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? No. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Landon? Aye to no. Salazar, no to aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Override of House Bill 36, HEA 45, 23 aye, 8 no.
By your vote, the motion to override the veto of House Bill 36 has passed. Madam Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, pursuant to Article 4, Section 8 of the Wyoming Constitution, I move that the Senate reconsider House Enrolled Act 46, being original House Bill 94, Charter School Authorization Amendments, and override the veto of House Bill 94.
Okay. You have heard the motion. The motion requires a 2/3 vote to override the veto. Is there any discussion? Being none, Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Veto override attempt, House Bill 94, HEA 46. Anderson? No. Barlow? No. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Crago? No. Crum? No. Dockstader? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Olson? Aye. Pappas? No. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? No. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman?
Aye.
No.
No, aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
Excuse me. Closing vote. Crago, no to aye. Closing. Vote closed. Veto override House Bill 94, HEA 46, 21 aye, 10 no.
By your vote, the motion to override the veto of House Bill 94 has passed. Madam Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, pursuant to Article 4, Section 8 of the Wyoming Constitution, I move that the Senate reconsider Senate Enrolled Act 59, being original Senate File 127, Administrative Rules, Legislative Review, and override the veto of Senate File 127.
Oh, okay. For the system. The system's not ready for that one yet. Are there any more that you have on your list, or is this it?
That's it.
Okay, that's it. I see. So it'll take about 5 minutes to load it into the system, so we'll stand at ease to the sound of the gavel. Just what do you think you're doing?
Check.
Senate will come back to order. Thank you to our Sergeant at Arms trainee, Senator Barlow. Don't mess with a Marine. All right. We left off with the roll call vote. We're voting on the motion to override the veto of Senate File 127. An aye vote would override the veto. A no vote sustains the veto. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Veto override, Senate File 127 being SEA 59. Anderson? No. Barlow? No. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Aye. Jones? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? No. Olson? I. Pappas. I. Pearson. I. Rothfuss. No. Salazar. I. Schuler. No. Scott. No. Smith. I. Steinmetz. I. President Beitman.
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Veto override of Senate File 127, 21 aye, 10 no.
By your vote, the motion to override the veto of Senate File 127 has passed. Let's see here. Looks like we have a joint conference committee report referencing House Message number 498. Use that one.
Joint Conference Committee Report Number 1 on Senate File 169, Strategic Investments in Projects Account Repeal, referencing House Message Number 498, signed Representatives Washut, Angelos, and Bear, Senators Hicks, Rothfuss, and Smith.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, in reference to House Message Number 498, Joint Conference Committee Number 1 to Senate File 169, the First Conference Committee is unable to agree on a report and requests that a second free committee be appointed.
Okay. So Joint Conference Committee Number 2 to Senate File 169 will consist of Senator Hicks, Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, and Senator Smith. Thank you. All right, any other business? I think that clears the desk. All right. Madam Majority Floor Leader, that clears the desk.
Mr. President, I move that we stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Thursday, March 6th, 2025.
Any announcements? Yep. Okay. Yes, sir, Senator Case.
I think the chairman of the conference committee is off the floor, but the Senator he's not off the floor. Would you announce our conference committee?
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to my colleague. So, Mr. President, your conference committee on Senate File 153, conference committee number 1, will meet tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in W110, 9 o'clock, okay. W110. 153, Mr. President, is, hold on. Residential real property taxable value. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. Any other announcements? All right, you've all heard the majority floor leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. The Senate will stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Thursday, March 6th.